Before the latest round of distracting news came through your feed, about 2 weeks ago we were all hearing about this $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill. But what did that really mean for me and you?
For expediting $1 trillion in deficit, I ran for office because I think we're destroying our country. We're going to destroy our currency. Why would I jump up and down and say, oh, well, let me please get out of the way so you can further bankrupt the country?
Well, of course, it meant a lot more than the 2 days of coverage would have kind of pointed to. And it's kind of the monotony and the constant flow of distracting news, ignorance, repetition of federal budget that has kind of lulled Americans to sleep as policymakers continue to run up our country's deficit tab, often in service of inside industry. So we're going to kind of throw out the big words and, as we say in the Army, break it down Barney style. This is the Backseat Economist. Facts change, numbers never lie. Your Congress must vote on the distribution of our tax dollars towards federal liabilities and services. Common sense would tell us that they will spend the money they receive in tax dollars to pay for these duties. But what actually happens, however, is that the government spends money in excess of revenue for many reasons that we can discuss in many other videos. Back to that $1.7 trillion spending bill, quote unquote spending bill. For most people, that sounds like that's the budget the government plans to spend, right? That's going to be a $1.7 trillion expenditure for the next fiscal year. Wrong. It's actually the amount of money in excess of revenue that the government is authorized to spend at the government's discretion. So this is discretionary pocket cash, basically, for lack of a better term, and it actually is just money that the government can spend if it needs to. However, it's also money that they are already planning on spending at the beginning of the year. So effectively, guaranteed debt. And let me give you an example. The congressional 2022 spending bill was $1.688 trillion. I'm sorry. I wish it was billion. In fiscal year 2022, the government estimated that it would create about $4.174 trillion in revenue through September 30th, 2022. So that would be the end of that fiscal year. This is compared to about $6.011 trillion in federal spending. So of course, we have a shortfall there. As usual, we have a shortfall just about every year for the past 30, 40 years, minus the 90s. This created a $1.837 trillion deficit. Now that ended obviously on October 1st. So at the end of October 1st, that was the deficit that we had. 1.688 trillion of that deficit was paid for from the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve selling government securities to foreign nations. That is how we fund all of our debt. I've heard in the past that China is actually one of the biggest purchaser of the securities. Now these securities are basically IOUs with interest. And you might say, wait a minute, Backseat Economist, 1.688 trillion doesn't quite equal 1.837 trillion in full. And you would be correct. So where is that difference made up? Actually, your Social Security, pension, and retirement plan savings. You know, that giant piece of your W-2 that shows a debit for tax. So in addition to the 1.83 trillion that we added to our debt last year, we are guaranteeing that at the beginning of this year, 2023, we're going to add a minimum of 1.7 trillion to that number, which in total is about 32 trillion as the current balance, and some change, as the current balance of our total debt. So now let's explain this omnibus portion of it, right? You heard this a lot. And again, the word choice and jargon for this almost seems designed for us not to care. But the bill is described as this simply because when Congress passes a budget, they are supposed to adjust mandatory and discretionary spending such that any increase in spending can be afforded. You know, this thing called balancing a budget. But Congress is so dysfunctional and industry is so intertwined in government that nobody can bear to cut costs from any programs. So rather than fight amongst each other about fiscal responsibility, you know, aka doing the right thing, Congress actually decides they're going to maintain spending exactly how it was last year. So cut nothing, everyone gets paid, all are happy, nobody has to go back to their constituents or to the pockets of the industry that helped fund their campaign and explain why they were affected by some sort of congressional cut in budget. And as far as the new projects go, well, we'll just go into debt for those. So let's pretend you're a functioning adult who's required to be fiscally responsible for a business you own. Now this business buys products to be sold. Let's say the product is common sense. So your business cannot just buy common sense all willy-nilly if the potential to be able to sell that product isn't there. That would, of course, leave you with more common sense with no one using it, and therefore a loss of profit. Not hard to figure out who the government is in this situation. So as a responsible businessman or woman, you periodically need to adjust the amount of product you buy to keep on hand in accordance with the revenue you expect to make from business operations. Now, let's say you have a friend who owns a common sense manufacturing company, and they convince you somehow to take out a credit card and buy a whole bunch of their product. And we'll leave you to kind of wonder with your imagination why somebody would do this. But let's say you go ahead and agree to this, and you not only buy enough product to maintain your current inventory, but you buy a massive surplus to increase it well in excess for the next year. Even though you have not actually seen nor expect to see any increase in sales, and you will not be cutting any costs in any other areas to help offset those additional purchases. Congratulations, you'll be bankrupt soon, but you also have a bright future as a politician. So, you are a citizen of a country who is routinely spending more than what they make. They are spending in excess of the revenue. Now, it is important to mention here that the only revenue a government makes is going to be either the securities they buy from other governments, interest on those, and tax dollars, right? America is so weary of taxes and tax increases that our tax revenue is in shambles. So that is a whole separate video that needs to happen here, and it will happen. There are many other separate videos that need to happen here, because the reason why America can continue to not only survive off of debt, but really thrive off debt is because we maintain the world reserve currency. And that needs to be explained for people to understand that this is really a house of cards that could fall at any moment. And you have this basically small level of security due to really the lack of outrage. Again, a 2-day media cycle in regards to this extra $1.7 trillion that we're adding on to our debt. So this relatively lack of outrage about how unresponsible fiscal policy is. And then we basically rely on our monetary policy, the Federal Reserve, to try and step in and make up for all these shortfalls and make up for all this lack of efficiency. And the next time we hear, let's say probably in about a year, that the government's trying to add another 1 point whatever trillion, maybe even 2 trillion something dollars spending bill, discretionary spending bill, your ears need to perk up, because they're not asking and they're not telling you that they are going to possibly spend this money, or that's all the money they're going to spend. They're telling you that that's the money that they have to spend out of debt, that in addition to all the money that they're already going to spend anyways, this is the amount of money that they're going to improve themselves to spend in addition to that, and it's going to be on your credit.